Okay, so the studio, Thought Cafe, some of you may or may not know about us. You probably know about Crash Course, though. Crash Course is one of the series that we work on. We work entirely in factual content, so we work on education pieces. We work for cause-based videos, you know, with the United Nations or UNICEF or places like that. Lots of not-for-profits. We do other education work. And we do documentary, film and TV stuff as well. And we're starting to do a little bit of more virtual reality experiences because that's becoming very popular in the education realm.
So Crash Course isn't our only baby. We have a lot of babies.
But it's a big, big first baby.
A big baby. Just some little snapshots there. We've worked with Singularity University. I don't know if anyone's familiar with any of these. Oliver Sacks was a short that we did, illustrated short. So just a variety of things. McGill University, we did a piece about mental health. So we definitely dabble in things that people should know and have an awareness about. So that's our passion.
Yeah, and we have a quick reel to play you guys. It's only like 2.5, 3 minutes, and it's pretty much all made with Adobe products. Can you believe it?
I can.
Yeah. Okay.
So that was our reel. Some of you may have seen it, but if you haven't, that was a combination of a lot of the work we've done. So we can get right into how we animate Crash Course, which is what a lot of what we'll be talking about today. And there's a couple stats that are pretty shocking to us whenever we think about them, because it's a beautiful thing how many people are into Crash Course. But the channel has almost 8 million subscribers, almost 1 billion channel views, which is crazy, and almost 1,000 videos. So I don't know how we did that, but we did it. And yeah, 4 to 5 episodes a week. I think it's 4 right now. When it's 5, it's quite busy at Thought Cafe. But basically, initially we branded the series. So when we first partnered with Crash Course, we actually developed the logo and the look and feel, the aesthetic of the whole show. And Adam was a huge part of that. It was basically a few of us working on the branding together.
Yeah, and so some of our design theory behind why Crash Course looks the way that it does is because we needed something that we could do with tight deadlines, have a style that other illustrators could easily adapt to or learn with these visual design rules. And I think that's what makes Crash Course, one of the strong things about Crash Course is that it's a very identifiable brand and style.
And we also wanted it to look fun and engaging, and the characters are really cute. So that it's fun to work on, which is
visual candy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one quick thing. So Crash Course is a co-production with Complexly in the U.S. Hank and John run Complexly. They do all the writing, filming the people on set, and then we do the branding, animation, merchandise, all the stuff sort of graphic design related. Just so everyone knows, we'll be talking specifically about sort of the branding, the merch, and the animation.
Yeah. So the first step was just branding all of Crash Course, and then when we do a new series, every time a new series comes around, the team on the Complexly side prepares all the content and curriculum and like the syllabus, and then we sort of brainstorm and work on how that series is going to look. So that's where we work on like Illustrator templates. So we kind of divide things into different visual segments, which we'll get more into later. Kind of like there's like type and there's animated sequences and different things that we template out, and then for each series we tweak things a little bit so that it feels like physics or feels like whatever the series topic is. Yeah, so this is a prize for the eyes, is a very early ugly logo for Crash Course. This was one of the first things we did. We found the worms looked a little weird. We decided not to go that route, but you could see behind there is a lot of early logo iteration. This is like the first file we ever created for Crash Course, so we just thought that would be funny to show.
Yeah. The worms do look a little creepy.
A little phallic.
Yeah.
We got better at the logos over time. So that's the current Crash Course logo, and then that's just a sampling of other series logos. So every time there's a series, we develop a new logo for it, based around the same design principles.
And like color theory too. You were talking about this the other day, right, Adam? The color theory stuff. Like just how like we really try to make each series have its own sort of color palette that's recognizable and kind of stands out. You may not notice as a viewer necessarily, but when you start to see it all lined up, it's like a beautiful rainbow.
It's all part of the branding. So it's when you have something that's very solid, you identify with it and connect the dots that way.
And I'd say you may not overtly notice it as a viewer, but you definitely have the look and feel that comes through that kind of careful design choices.
Yeah, and then this is an example of an Illustrator template, not like an actual template file. It's an Illustrator file, but we use it as a base for designing what this looks like for different series. So this is a segment that we internally refer to as an unhistoric. It's whenever we show a person or a historical figure. So we usually get a photograph, we cut the person out, we color them in like different wacky colors. There's usually elements floating around them. There's like funny quotes that we sort of try to think of that go with each person. And this one was for study skills. So there's some notes and things there. There's like little boxes showing colors. That's just for whenever we design it for a new series, let's say physics, how do we want to tweak that design? And then there's certain elements we have to stick to to make animation efficient, to keep things consistent. So that's just an example of that.
Yeah, and this way, like any illustrator that's on the team can really jump into any series at any time, and they're familiar with the type of rules that we have. They're familiar with the way we're using our color palettes. They're familiar with how we're communicating. You know, you see layers on there. I think I have a laser. Oh yeah. You can see things like notes here. Like that wouldn't be in the final output. That's really just for the illustrator to be able to like know what they're supposed to write in this one, how to, some rules to follow. There's some stuff about, I think, color palette. And then there's usually some layer rules that get put into like the initial file for that series.
And that, for the record, is not a lot of layers. Like, I don't know if you could see that layer palette, but that's not a lot. That's a good day.
And the most important part of the unhistoric segment are the jokes. The side jokes, those are tough.
We put a lot of thought into, actually, Adam, so each series we call the unhistoric joke something different. And Adam is our go-to person for thinking of what those are.
Puns are good.
Puns are good, yeah. So like for chemistry, for example, I think we did molecule. We always hope that people notice them, but I don't know if they do.
I think they're a bit subtle sometimes.
Very subtle.
Okay, so this here is like a bit of secret sauce, even though it seems quite simple. But basically, you know, the first process when a script comes in is we annotate the script. We basically, whoever's sort of creative directing that series or that episode goes through all of the text, all of the episode, and basically creates direction of what they want to be shown on screen, what's going to be animated, what's going to be just sort of side ditties, what's going to be unhistorics, like she was talking about, what's going to be full screen animation. And then everyone works from this document to kind of, as the illustrations get finished, those illustrations get put in. Our subject matter experts then can log in as well and use it. And then we even have a bit of a connection from these annotation documents directly into Illustrator and After Effects, where our timelines can actually get sort of pre-laid out based on where annotations are and how it's written and which files are listed in this document.
So you can kind of see like the far left column with the bullet points is our script. It's written that way because it feeds into After Effects and then basically lays out that segment, that unhistoric segment for the animator. So there's some really cool ways we've found to, you know, create efficiencies and use code and stuff that I don't understand as much, but it works.
So are you using expressions in After Effects to do some of that layout?
Yeah, it's a custom plugin stuff.
Very cool.
Yeah, so that's just an example illustration file, just another one to show you guys. It's got like a scene and a van and a person in it. So that's just what you might expect for a full screen animation, what the art comes in as. So the animator has to sort through all those layers and bring it to life and make it look really cool. And then this is a character file. So the characters are probably the most, I guess, worked out, rigorous thing we do in terms of consistency. It's really, really important for any illustrators joining our team to know, you know, not just the style elements of a character. There's things that always stay the same, like the limbs are a stroke that is, I guess, often the same width.
Yeah, they're usually the same, and the reason for that is when you start to work in an animation pipeline, you need to have, like when you're using rigs and things like that, you need to have the layer names the same. Everything needs to be the same, otherwise any sort of automation gets all thrown out of whack. And if anyone's familiar with After Effects, the puppet tool, which is what we use with, we also use it with some plugins and things like that to make a rig. But you'll notice that the bounding boxes change and things like that, so you have to kind of tweak it per character. But yeah, it's a good way to work.
Does anyone here like know about rigging or puppet tool, animating characters?
After Effects? There, we got some hands.
Nice. Yeah, I think actually, though, it's a really good point. We've been able, over the last few years in particular, we've been able to automate through expression stuff in After Effects, a lot of the like really annoying process, like setup process of animating. So essentially our animators will get this file, and as long as the illustrator has labeled everything correctly, which I'd say they do like 99% of the time.
99.9.
Yeah, the animators and the illustrators are always fighting about this.
That's
When
the
there's like
drama at the studio.
there's like an eye on the ear or something. But so as long as that's been done correctly, then we have these internal plugins that we run, and it basically rigs that thing for you. So you're not taking all that extra time to like rig it yourself and put all the pins everywhere. Like everything's kind of set up ready to go, and then we have some custom animations that are already built in that we can use. But essentially you always want to find ways within the software to save the non-creative time. Like don't, like anything that's non-creative, like setup and stuff, like try and find ways to just get past that so that yourself or your team is using most of their time for the more creative, difficult things, because it'll just make them better.
So when you rig a character, it's telling what points move and how, and it gives you the points to control that. So instead of just having a character wobble like this, which is how I move, you'd be able to have bent arms and head tilts and that sort of thing, and you determine that in the rig.
It's basically a skeleton in which the art is placed on, and everything's referenced to each other. So then you have a real life character.
See, you described it so much better than I did.
That's just some more art that you guys can see. Just another example.
I think James put this. James is one of the other senior art directors on Crash Course. I think he put this in just to like bring up that we're constantly putting in Easter eggs, but like they're kind of like hit or miss. It's really funny because sometimes like the younger people at the studio are like, no, that's too old.
Yeah, sometimes they reveal
Like-
our age. 'Cause
Yeah,
we're
exactly.
Like,
Yeah,
oh,
Grandpa.
they'll get this, and
Yeah, they're like, no one's gonna get that, and then no one makes a comment.
What do you mean you don't get a Boy Meets World reference? Show's
Saved by
great.
the Bell.
Saved by the Bell, Zach Morris.
Yeah, so there's always
Okay.
Easter eggs somewhere. We try and hit a fairly wide demo with them, but sometimes they hit, sometimes they miss. But when they do hit, everyone like writes about it and stuff in the comments, so it's a lot of fun.
That's more examples of artwork. This was done by one of our illustrators, Jess, who works on she worked on mythology. Now she's working on history of science, and I think she's helping with theater.
Yeah, I think mythology, as far as like sort of more kind of traditional, dramatic kind of scenes in illustration and animation, mythology, if you guys ever haven't seen it, you should check out some of the episodes. Those thought bubbles, like those animated sequences are super detailed. A lot of work went into those ones because a lot of them are these old ancient stories. So they're really interested if you want to, really check out some of the super more detailed kind of Crash Course stuff. That's not as much the motion graphic kind of science stuff. Mythology is a really good series to take a look at.
So everybody write that down. You have homework.
This is just a collage of thumbnails that we've made. So we also design, we figure out the designs of each series thumbnail and the way it's going to look, and then we create a thumbnail for each episode. So that's a big component of the art that we do every week as well. And we've tried a lot of different things. Illustrator is really good we use it a lot for editing type and creating like nice graphic design elements that you see there. And we're always experimenting with what thumbnails will be the most catchy without being clickbaity.
I think everyone has their own theories of what works for a thumbnail, and I think it's just, I don't know. At the end of the day, I think it's just kind of what the topic is. Like clickbait does work, but I don't know. Just having the small title, large title, character, no character, it all kind of impacts it.
I also think it's highly personalized to what the content is, right? And
Totally.
if you have an audience that's already watching your things, the things that are going to draw them in and expand are different than if you've never had anybody click on your content before.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. And then when you see each, because these are all different series, but when you see a series sort of playlist, all the colors blend together really nicely, so it feels consistent.
Our recent thing has been trying to make them look like real world objects. So for games, it was like a game cartridge. I don't know if anyone's picked up on that.
Yeah, but it's
Yeah.
Super Nintendo, so maybe that's our generation.
Oh.
People are like, what's
floppy
that?
disk.
What's that gray thing? Doesn't look like a game.
For theater, it's like a ticket stub. For computer science, it's a computer chip. So we're proud of that.
So a little bit about the deadlines. I mean, when we started the series, Adam was talking about, we had to make the art, we had to approach the animation in a very simplified way because we basically have 2 weeks to produce an episode. We're doing 4 to 5 a week, but our run lasts about 2 weeks. It's about 2 to 3 days for an illustrator, maybe a day or two for the creative director who's annotating off and on. They're not doing that every hour because it's really intense, so you kind of jump off and on it. And then there's about 5 days for animation, one animator per show. So it's super intense. So the style really had to lend itself to that kind of deadline. And I think the other really important thing is with this type of sort of show, we really focused on making it segment based. So you guys will see in the series, there's a lot of different segments. Like there's quote pop-ups, and then there's the unhistoric, like old people thing. And then there's like the thought bubble, which is just an animated segment. Then there's like on-screen ditties is what we call them, when like something comes on screen but the person's still there in live action.
We have weird names for these things. It's not like an industry name or anything. Like, I don't know where Diddy came from and why we call it that, but
It just started and we couldn't stop it.
we couldn't stop. It's too late. We have to run with it.
And then we have a ongoing animation library that is giant. I think Adam was saying the other day, it's like there's 40,000 Illustrator files.
I think the next slide is like a screenshot of it.
Oh, yeah?
Potentially. Yeah.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Just folders within folders.
And okay, I've got to marvel at that for a second. How do you find anything when you're managing folders inside of folders inside of folders?
You just you close your eye and then you just click around.
Hope for the
That's
best.
what I do. That's a full day's work for me. We usually have some sort of naming convention based on the series and what type of asset it is. And over the years, since we've built up such a large catalog, it's handy to know the catalog because then we can go, we can use the bar scene from 3 years ago, and then that asset's done. So that makes our pipeline much quicker.
So you don't name things untitled .1,
Right.
.1,
Yeah.
.1, final.
That's a no.
We try not to.
underscore, final. Yeah.
There's some old rogue files from early Crash Course days that I'd love to rename or just get rid of, but it's a scary thing to do because you might need them.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. We have explored using some asset management systems. We've played with Bridge quite a bit, but the library grows so fast every week. We find that like it's a lot of our illustrators management just to like keep that up with all the metadata stuff, so we don't really do it. But because I think everyone's sort of like, we have an open space, open environment studio, and whenever anyone needs something, you can just like ask a question and someone will be like, yeah, like episode 265, like whatever, it was in there somewhere, and then they'll find it.
And worst case, you can go into like, the folders there. You can pop into characters and just explore different episodes to browse, or use the Finder like to search, like old lady, and you'll find a lot of old ladies.
Yeah, there's a bunch.
Yeah.
I do think it points to one of the challenges of high volume content creation, right? A lot of the tools that exist to manage your assets are really for more traditional, slow turnaround pipelines.
Totally.
And so when you're cranking out 4 to 5 episodes a week with this much content, trying to stay on top of that, naming things in a way, having that organizational like rigor is really important, especially when you're working with teams.
Totally.
Yeah, exactly.
I can talk a bit about this. I don't know how many here are animators versus like motion graphic artists, or a bit of both. When we started the studio, Susanna and myself were both graphic designers who started sort of doing motion graphic design. And I think it's really important to sort of know the differences. We do both at the studio, and we mix and match in Crash Course. But Crash Course was fundamentally built on motion graphics, and motion graphics is essentially animated graphic design. So when you're looking to communicate education, something that's really technical, something that's hard to understand, it's better to use a motion graphic approach. Animation tends to be better for sort of relaying emotional, dramatic, character-based stuff. So we do kind of do a merger of both, but definitely our studio and when we started Crash Course, it was focused on sort of a motion graphic approach. And that's one of the reasons why After Effects really was the tool that we were going to use versus any other compositing or animation software, because it's really well suited to motion graphic work. And then with the puppet tools and stuff, it kind of also allows you to get a bit of that animation, character, kind of drama feel in there at the same time.
Yeah, you can cut corners while making something look cool and quick, and then you can kind of, for one scene, but then in the next scene, you can kind of try to show more emotional response in another scene. So it's versatile that way.
Cool. I've noticed you guys have mentioned plugins several times. There's plugins up here. You've mentioned expressions. After Effects is incredibly extensible. So how do you go about finding what plugins might be useful to your workflow? What resources do you use to learn more about what's available?
Hundo?
Yeah, Hundo, our technical.
He's like a technical manager.
Special.
His name's
Yeah.
Corey McDonald, but we call him Hundo P.
Yeah. Everything he does is 100%, so he's Hundo.
So they have weird names for everything.
Everything. Yeah.
But basically, when you're when you have a problem, it's like, oh, like I want this to have a bounce. You can do like a manual scale up, scale down type of thing, but then you just do a quick web search. You'll find these plugins, and there's various ways to do it. And some people actually don't like using scripts, just because if you're fine tweaking a specific scene, you can just adjust it that way.
Yeah, and so we use a lot of third-party scripts, but more, I think we use more internal scripts. So we have a couple different like UI scripts that have been developed in-house that we call Hundo tools. And they're basically things like I was talking about earlier, where it's like one button press rigs up the character. You can do like, you can set up your 2.5D scene really easily, like all your background art, move it into the background without it like getting all weird and with the scaling and setting up a camera properly. There's a lot of little tools that we've developed internally that are really specific to Crash Course. So that's like, you know, if you came to work at our studio in After Effects, that's one of the first things you would learn is how Hundo Tools works. And it's a pretty broad range of stuff that is in those tools. So maybe one day we'll offer them to fans somehow.
He even did like an extension for us for Illustrator, because a huge, like we touched on earlier, a lot of drama arises from not layering properly or like naming layers properly. So it's such a small thing, but like double clicking into the layer to rename it, if you have like 25 layers or 50 layers or sometimes even 100, it saves just that amount of time. He calls it like rename with ease. That's the extension. So basically it just allows you to tab through the layer so that you're just doing tab, rename, which doesn't sound like a huge time, but it is. Like, and it isolates the layer, so it hides everything except that layer. So you can double check, you can just tab through to double check that you don't have eyes on the same layer as a mouth, which is a huge, that's like a deal breaker. You can't do that.
But yeah, definitely get your like script on, you know what I mean? Like go check out AE scripts. They have like tons of After Effects scripts and stuff for the Adobe products, and sometimes it helps with those extra things, and then it's always funny because you'll start using one and then Adobe will like buy that company and then the script's built in. It's amazing. So they always come in eventually. It's pretty cool. So then we've got
Some examples too.
yeah, so we also work in Cinema 4D for more of like visual effects stuff that we do, but we it now incorporates into After Effects as well. So if you guys are ever thinking about 3D, I would suggest looking at Cinema 4D as like your entrant into that, because it works really well with After Effects. We use it quite a bit. This is just a puppet tool example like we were talking about earlier. This is just a scene from mythology. Infographic scene. Yeah, so Creative Lab. There's the Creative Cloud Jesus, kind of, but he doesn't have long hair for some reason. Yeah, so I don't know, like we used to buy the software boxes back in the day, and then you'd have to buy a bunch of licenses, and then it was, you know, send it around, and then you never wanted to update to the new one. You'd wait like 2 update runs because it was just, you know, it felt cost prohibitive. You were probably spending the less or more money, or I don't even know, but it always felt cost prohibitive because it would just be like, oh, another update, like another year. But once Creative Cloud came out and we started running that way, like as far as management is concerned, when you have a medium-sized studio or whatever, all of a sudden it's just like easy. Everyone can update. You know, people can log out and work at home if they have to and just log into their same account. It's just all the updates happen, although sometimes we like hold back for maybe like a month. For like the new ones, but it's really nice. Like all the new features come, all that stuff. So I mean, I'm sure most of you, I don't even think you can not do Creative Cloud anymore, right? It's just Creative Cloud.
Right now, the only way to have access to the creative tools is through Creative Cloud.
Right.
And when there is an update to the tool set, like Photoshop recently got symmetry. It was like Christmas Day. I was so happy. I'm like, symmetry! Finally, symmetry!
It's nice too, I think, because like we sometimes in a creative studio, like there might be programs that they have that you would have never heard of, but like because you're just part of the cloud and they've got all the software there, you can just grab it and try it out, and maybe you start using it, as opposed to before you'd have to like buy it and it was kind of, you wouldn't want to. But yeah, it's great. So I think that's been really important. We haven't hopped into like the team projects thing yet. We've tried it a couple times. I don't know if anyone here has used it, but essentially you can have a project that multiple people are working on at the same time. We're kind of waiting till like year 1's over with that, but I do anticipate that we will be using it significantly.
We did the like shared file thing for.
Yeah, so we've been
a
using
recent
shared
project.
libraries, which everyone
Yeah.
should look into. That's getting really helpful. We're starting to get the feeling. Any new sort of feature that comes out, it takes a little while to really implement into your studio or your own space. And but that doesn't mean that like it's not worth it. So we often will on smaller client projects, we'll sort of maybe be like, oh, this is a good opportunity to try out the shared libraries or try out team projects. We've done some character animator stuff as well, mostly on our Patreon live streams. I don't know if any of you guys have ever seen that stuff, but like sometimes we'll like act like we're the Mongol and kind of just like walk around.
Character Animator allows you to take layered objects that are puppets, and then you can control it by performing for your webcam. So you put together the puppet that has your eyes and your mouth and your limbs, and you can, as you make surprised faces, your puppet will then make a surprise face. So it's a good way to kind of jump into animation without doing all of the point-by-point animation, which can be very overwhelming.
Totally. And it's come a long way. I remember when the beta was around, we were playing around with it. It was cool. But now it's like a lot more substantial. So you guys should definitely check that out.
There's more stuff coming.
Yeah? Oh, big secrets. Big announcement right here. You heard it here first.
No announcements, just hinting at secrets.
Yeah. Oh my God. So Crash Course and Adobe have put together a series of tutorials that will be being released over the next couple weeks that specifically target a single Crash Course episode and how everything is done. So this will be available. These are some of the episodes, but it's all for a single episode. And with this, we will be releasing the artwork as well, so you guys can actually use the artwork in an After Effects project. Or if you're an illustrator, you can play around with the artwork and just see kind of how things are layered and how we do things. So we're really excited about that. And
the team on Complexly's side has contributed to that too. So it's like editing footage. You can see there.
Yeah, Stan. I don't know if you
sound.
guys know Stan. He's amazing. He's one of the directors over there, and he does some editing as well. He did the editing one and the sound design one, and then we did the 2 illustrators and animating ones. So it'll be a lot of fun and pretty good resource, I think.
I think it's an amazing resource. I know one of the problems when people sit down to try and learn something the first time, there's a lot of content about how to use a specific tool or how this tool does this thing. But if you're not learning it in the context of something you're actually trying to complete, it can be hard to, yes, I know how to use a hammer, but I still don't know how to build a house. And this gives you a house to aim towards, which is amazing.
Yeah, and it's really like an A to Z, like from the beginning. I mean, other than sort of maybe shooting, like filming somebody, other than that part, it's the full process. So the full post-production on an episode. So yeah, it's really nice sometimes to see like everything that's involved and kind of get it broken down, and all of a sudden it becomes like not so intimidating. It's something that anyone could do, even sort of on their own.
Well, and I find when you learn one program, like say Illustrator, it's easier to then understand After Effects and vice versa. So it can be overwhelming to think about like getting to know them all, but if there's one that you're gravitating towards right now or where your focus is, there's a lot of basic things that they have in common. So you just kind of get it, like get the language after a bit.
We do that intentionally. No, it is, and because we understand that most people are using more than one Adobe tool, we do try and make the visual consistency and the language between them similar. So it's not like, oh, well, I've just mastered this thing, and now I have to go and learn, now I have to walk backwards all the time. It's hard, because there's a lot to do to make beautiful work. And I think one of the things that I think is really cool to learn about is like the teams behind things. When you're starting doing content creation, understanding that working with other people is actually a really healthy way to get stuff done. You don't have to know every single tool. You don't have to know every single step. You can find someone who's a master at Illustrator. And if you're really good at After Effects, you can partner to get things the way that you want them to look and feel.
Yeah, like even with when John and I started the studio, we both came from graphic design, but my focus was more like print, editorial, magazine sort of design. And John was more into motion graphics, animation, interactive design. We were allowed to kind of explore different things in our program and take different routes. But even to this day, like I don't really work in After Effects at all. I couldn't animate a character. Like I've animated highlights like over text, and I was really excited for a different project. I've gone in there and like exported frames, and I was excited. So it's baby steps, but it's the point too is like, if you're really interested in animation as a field, you can go into it as an illustrator, as an animator, as a sound designer, as a producer, as a writer. Like there's multiple roles that people in our studio play in on Crash Course. So whatever you gravitate towards, you can get into that field and then master one thing first, and then you can move on to the next if you want.
And I also went to school for illustration, and then I was really curious about motion graphics. I'm like, oh, this is fun. And then I just kind of went almost fully motion graphics animation, and then now I'm kind of doing like the art direction, and you just kind of hop around and just kind of follow what interests you.
Susanna, I just wanted to point out that there's some new tutorials if you want to learn After Effects.
Yeah.
That will take you through the creation.
I got to do our own tutorials. I do. Like, it would be very handy.
I think too, like on a final note for everyone here, when we started the studio, like some of our early projects were done just Susanna doing the illustration and myself animating. And I think it's, where the software is nowadays, and if you build sort of aesthetic rules that you're going to follow, it's quite achievable to make really nice motion graphic work and animations and stuff. So with a very small team, even our teams on each series, we might be doing 5 episodes a week, but each episode is only 2.2 people. It's not like a huge group of people working on an episode at all times. So I think, yeah, it's just something that you can sort of aspire to and realize that, like, don't be afraid, and you can do a lot with what's out there already. So I think, yeah, like, go do some Crash Course like stuff.
Okay, now I'm going to ask questions, and then I'm going to let you guys ask questions. Does that sound fair? All right. So my first question, I'm fascinated by the fact that you guys focus on factual content. I myself am a huge documentary buff and used to make documentaries myself. So how did you decide that that was going to be the area of focus for you, given the wide range of things you could be doing?
I think part of it started when we got out of school, and a lot of the jobs that were available to us was for advertising. So it was a lot of ad agency work, which paid great. The hours were really intense. Sometimes sometimes it wasn't that rewarding when you finished the final product. And we kind of started to look towards this movement that was happening within online animation, where motion graphic work was really starting to focus on things with integrity, like cause-based stuff, education-based stuff. So we started to get really excited about that. And documentaries started kind of getting popular again. In the early 2000s, they were kind of like dying out, and then they started coming back in around 2009, 2010. And people started getting really interested about factual content. And the interesting thing that I often bring up to people is YouTube, as a platform, is essentially mostly factual content and music. So vlogging essentially is factual content in a sense. Education, do-it-yourself tutorials, like all this stuff is factual content. So we found sort of a perfect world to sort of exist in that really fit what we were looking to do. And then from sort of a basis in YouTube, we started doing some broadcast TV stuff, some film documentary stuff, and now like some VR stuff. But yeah, I think it was just, we really wanted to feel really good about the work we were doing, and we wanted to see if we could carve out a niche kind of studio that only did factual stuff.
That's awesome. How did you get kind of tapped to do the work for Crash Course? I mean, that's a big thing, and you obviously have done an amazing job at creating this really visual brand that I think anybody who's ever seen Crash Course will instantly identify. But how did that relationship start?
Yeah, so basically in 2009, I think, we kind of started working on some animated pieces, just like getting stuff out there. And we were reaching out to anyone who inspired us. So like great thinkers, book authors, journalists, anywhere we came across content that we thought was really something everybody needs to know, and that we could elevate from a text-based format to animation, to kind of spread the word. We would reach out to people. So we came across a vlog episode that John Green did on their channel, and it was about the healthcare crisis, I don't even remember anymore. Healthcare reform in 2009, there was a big issue. And he just explained it really, really well. We were like, who is this guy? We didn't know anything about him. We didn't know
We had no
Vlogbrothers.
idea.
Tiny creator.
Yeah, we were just like, this guy just is so engaging to listen to, and he explains things really well, and he's really smart, and we just want to animate this video. So we contacted him and asked him if we could animate his episode, and he was like, I don't know if
I think we started before he responded.
I think
were
we
just
already
like,
started.
Throw
Yeah,
an
we were
email
like,
out there.
we should ask him if it's okay. And he got back to us, and he was like, yeah, that'd be great. Like, I'd love to see it when you guys are done. And he's told us now that he was kind of like, oh yeah, whatever. Like, I think people get requests like that often. He didn't expect anything to come back, but when we came back to him with the piece, he really loved it. He was like, this is amazing. He wanted to put it on his channel and help us spread the word. And it was great for him too, because it took something he explained so well and put it in a visual format, which I think was great for, people who have different ways of absorbing information. That's part of why animation is such a big thing. And yeah, and then from there we just kind of forged a bit of a connection, a bit of a bond. And I think it was like 2 years later that YouTube funded a number of educational channels. I think it was 100 channels, and Crash Course was one of them. And John wanted us to partner to be the graphics team. So we were kind of like, wow, like what is this going to be? We had no idea if it would be a success or what would happen, but we decided to go for it. And then the rest is history.
Yeah, he reached out to us and was like, I'm pitching this thing and I want to pitch it with, you guys in mind for doing all the animation. And we were like, yeah, that's awesome, because we had talked about doing an animation series sort of thing, like in education. I know John and Hank both wanted to do like a free education thing for teachers and students. So it kind of really meshed perfectly with who we were as a studio. It was a bit intimidating at first. Even that first year, we just did one show.
Right, like people don't often know, but that first season of biology, we didn't do that. That's
the one that we
team.
didn't do. Yeah, it was a different team.
So that was running at the same time as World History. So we worked on World History, and then Hank had another team.
Mm-hmm.
And then for year 2, I think it was like U.S. history and I can't remember, chemistry. That's when we got into the whole thing. So yeah.
And I joined shortly after, but I actually applied, and then no answer. And I'm like, no, like this is perfect.
So
like
rude.
this is a perfect chance. I want to like join this, and then I joined.
But you were in for the first Crash Course series.
Yeah, the very first. But
we hired him for World History 1.
it was the same thing though, where the stars aligned. And
Yeah.
I wanted to do educational content, very much like Thought Cafe.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is perfect.
It was just funny because we didn't really know how huge John and Hank were, like, for a while. And then we realized, we were like, what the hell is going
You're
on?
like, wait, he's written books?
We were like, these guys are huge. What happened? We just didn't really know. Like, YouTube was so early then. Like, there was no ad revenue. There was no, like, we didn't even really.
I mean, they were already.
And they were, like, huge on it, yeah. We just didn't get it yet, but we got it pretty quick.
Do you have it now?
Oh, we got it.
I think,
Okay,
I think
good.
we're getting
Excellent.
it. Yeah.
Okay, so couple key takeaways right there. Reach out to people, form connections, and take risks. I think that's awesome. That's
And
like the best startup story ever.
And apply twice.
Apply twice or 3 times. And get back to people when they apply already.
Right.
Jeez.
We have someone who responds to all our info emails.
We've
So.
upgraded.
But we do get a lot of emails from people being like, hey, can you do my homework?
Can you animate? People ask if we can animate their project that's due like the next day.
Yeah,
and
they're
we're
like, I have a project, it's due
No.
like tomorrow, and it would be amazing if you could help me out. And we're like, no.
I wonder if my kids have done that. Okay, so the question was, and I'm doing this so everybody gets to hear it. There's a lot of overlap in features within Creative Cloud tools. How do you know which tool is the right tool or the best suited for the task that you're doing?
I mean, it happens a lot with other projects like outside of Crash Course, but essentially we talk to the illustrator or the animator and we really work out like what are they comfortable in? What software do they already know? What would be good for them to learn? So it really just depends on what we're trying to execute. But the great thing about most software packages these days, but specifically the Adobe stuff, is they all talk to each other. So all the file formats work together. So if someone really wanted to animate something in Character Animator, which we have done, you can bring it over fairly easily, as long as everything is pretty much getting finished in After Effects and then Premiere. Yeah, it really just depends. But in other projects, like when we're doing more traditional animation, like frame by frame stuff, sometimes we will let them use whatever software they're comfortable in, but then it gets piped back into Photoshop and then After Effects after.
Yeah, and to just break it down, you basically just have to know what the purpose of the asset is. So if you're doing something for print and you need it on a billboard, it's like you're more likely to do a vector-based image, which is done in Illustrator, because then you can scale up, scale down. But with Photoshop, you're using rasterized images, so then you have the pixels that get stretched, and that won't scale up. So so you just kind of have to know a wide range of the tools, and then you can kind of reduce it that way.
Yeah, and I'd actually say we use obviously both Photoshop and Illustrator. Basically, we use Illustrator primarily for Crash Course. The vector workflow is just, a lot of people know it. A lot of illustrators know it really well. But I'd say Photoshop tends to work better with After Effects, like performance-wise, it's faster, but you don't have as much flexibility in the sense that with Illustrator assets, we can move cameras around in and out and just continually rasterize their vector shapes, and it always looks good. It never gets pixelated. Whereas if we're doing something straight in Photoshop, we have to make it like 2 to 3 times bigger than it needs to be in case we want to zoom in or in case we want to do camera movements. So basically, it really just comes down to what you're doing. But yeah, Illustrator, I'd say, is more flexible and a bit easier for illustrators to jump in. But Photoshop's like better performance in After Effects. It'll render faster. It's a bit nicer in some ways.
Okay, so the question was around the art direction process. When you're creating the original assets, how do you manage that process? Do you use things like mood boards or other techniques before you jump into the tools to create the actual assets?
Yeah, so we actually we get together and brainstorm. That's like a huge part of it. Having more minds to kind of bring ideas into the mix is super helpful. Sometimes on your own, it can be tough to sort of go deep. If you're, you can get into that mode, but it can help to just have other people pepper things in. And with something like Crash Course, when we work on a new series, we always start with a brainstorm meeting with everyone in the studio, even if they don't work on Crash Course or as closely, because everybody knows it to a degree and has great ideas to contribute. And the topic and subject matter is all something that a lot of people can understand and relate to. And we kind of just go through all our different like segments that we're going to end up with. So like typography on historic, colors, and we go through them and think, okay, like how can physics play into showing a photo of a person? What kind of elements can we bring into that make it feel like physics?
Also, when we're discussing, it's good to, like Suze was saying, that it's good to share your ideas with other people, because your ideas may spark my ideas, and then you kind of get like this energy going in the room where it's like, oh, how about this? That looks like an eyeball. Like, yeah, let's go this way, and you just kind of feed off each other.
Yeah, and looking online for inspiration is always helpful. Like, I know it sounds pretty basic, but at the start of any creative project, we'll do a Google search for something to kind of spark it. Even like if it is a topic, like let's say chemistry, searching for chemistry in Google Images, it's like what pops up, what kind of visuals come up, what are the basic, most repeated elements and icons that show up, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's really special about Crash Course, because the turnarounds are so fast, we try to, like, with other client projects or stuff that we're making ourselves, like there's usually a director, an art director, and then illustrators, and it's a bit more like there's a hierarchy to creative. But with Crash Course, everyone's sort of like right on the same level. Everyone's getting like really putting input in and getting to do their own thing. Like when the animators get the art, they're not necessarily following something that's been storyboarded perfectly. Like they can kind of just do their own kind of thing. And the reason for that is because the timeline's so intense. If you had a very heavy top-down hierarchy, there would be burnout like crazy, and people wouldn't feel like they're contributing, and it would just be horrible. But with sort of how we've structured the team, there's about 12 to 14 people, and like everyone gets to jump around, sort of like directing some episodes, like the animation part, working on the art, working on the animation, like, and really kind of putting their own stamp on it, which I think has been crucial for not only growing the team, but also keeping the team, keeping people around, and also enjoying something that you're producing a weekly episode of.
It also, like, it all exists off a base brand that's already been created, so it's a little easier because each series is building on what's already there. But when we start from scratch, even with Crash Course back in the day or with other client projects, we do usually do like mood board. We explore typography, fonts, colors, all that kind of thing.
Tell us more about your backgrounds.
Yeah, so we're from Toronto, Canada, which I don't know if you guys know. Woo, Canada! Yeah. Tim Hortons. Just kidding.
No one actually gets
No.
coffee there in Canada, just so you guys know.
But yeah, so John and I both went to York University and Sheridan College in Toronto, outside of Toronto. So it was a joint graphic design program where you have classes at both schools, and yeah, that was our background. And then, like, John and I came together as friends, and then we got married. But
You don't have to get married.
You don't
to
have
form
to
a
get
design
married.
I want to put this out there. Adobe has a lot of customers working together who have not been married.
it's not a requirement to animate. I also recommend having some guiding if you're going to run a company together as a couple. Have some therapy or guided structure to get you through. But no, it's good. It's great. But we just, when we came together, both of us having a similar background with different directions that aligned together, and similar interests, sort of ideologically, politically, what we wanted to do in the world, it just made sense. It just kind of fell into our laps, like the idea to do that.
And I'm also from Toronto, so I went to Sheridan College, which was pretty well known for the visual arts and illustration, and always liked digital art a little more, just because you can have a quicker turnaround and have more clients, and you can just kind of reach out to people in that way.
Yeah, so I did design school, and then afterwards I did film school. And yeah, it's interesting. I think the approach we took, the company's like 9 years old now. I think it'll be 10 years next September, I guess. And we often tell people, like, we didn't do the whole like startup thing where you like get a loan and then you just like quit your job and you just like try and survive. We did like a very slow burn, a slow kind of, we both had jobs, and then we just kind of started doing something 1 day a week, and then it became 2 days a week, and then all of a sudden I was part-time, and then
the company I was working at shut down like in 1 day. So I was
Right.
like, I'm free.
yeah, we kind of lucked out. She was working for a gaming company doing design, and it just went under. But she got like 3 months of severance or something. So we were like,
I was
"Woo,
wondering
company."
what about that was lucking out exactly. We lucked out because
Well,
she
yeah.
became unemployed.
No, she got like a good severance package. So it was like, oh, this
I
is
also
the time.
don't know if it's like okay to say. I mean, there was severance and then like unemployment insurance, but like I spoke to them many times. I was like, "Am I allowed to work on a new company while I'm getting unemployment?" And they were like, "I don't know, I guess."
Yeah.
So I was like, "Okay."
It's Canada,
it's
so I don't
okay.
know. They hooked it up. So yeah, but it was slow. Like, it was really slow. Like, it was just us two for almost 3 years. And then it was like we got one other employee, and it was an illustrator, and then we got Adam, and now it's like
That's
20 something people. Yeah. So it takes a while, like you don't have to think of it like, let's rush into this and be really risky about it, because I know a lot of people do that, and that can work, but you can also do it in a safer, more managed way. So I would encourage either, but
There does come a time where you quit your job and jump in.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
scary.
But you've already kind of like, you know at that point that like you've been doing this part-time, and you can handle it, as opposed to just like quitting everything and starting. I'd freak out.
I would also highly recommend trying different kind of creative fields that you're not used to. So it's like, try to make a website, and like you realize what you hate. It's like, oh, web's brutal. So like I never touched the web, and I'm like, oh, like I'll try animation. Oh, and then you just kind of snowball and jump around that way.
Excellent. Thank you guys so much for all of the wonderful knowledge you've shared with us. I actually just got a text from one of my coworkers asking how my panel went. So how did it go? Woo!